Hey guys, tonight we're brewing something slow, warm, and extremely unremarkable, in the best possible way. We're talking about how tea, yes tea, quietly transformed from a luxury import into Britain's unofficial national sleep aid. It may not sound thrilling, and honestly, it isn't, but that's exactly the point. This story unfolds like a lazy swirl of steam from a porcelain cup. And frankly, you probably won't survive this episode without nodding off halfway through a biscuit. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing who's drifting off from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin not in London, but somewhere quieter. Picture a foggy English morning, damp cobblestones, the scent of rain-soaked wool, and the gentle clink of ceramic against wood. You trudge down a sleepy lane lined with shuttered shops and window boxes full of tired-looking marigolds. Inside a dim parlor, someone is brewing the first tea of the day. It's not strong. It's not fancy. But it is, without question, soothing. But it didn't start this way. The tale of British tea begins with something far louder: trade ships. Large, slow-moving, groaning wooden beasts making their way from China to England, stuffed with spices, silks, and, eventually, tiny parcels of dried leaves. Tea began as a curiosity. A luxury. A leaf from afar. You can almost hear the rustle of it being unpacked. The skeptical sniffing. The first attempts at steeping. Historians still argue whether it was Catherine of Braganza, Portuguese princess and eventual queen consort, who really kicked off tea culture in England, or if it just happened to catch on at the exact right time for the overworked and underhydrated nobility. You sit in on one of those early sips, 1660s, candlelight flickering, silver spoons tapping gently on china. The tea is earthy, slightly bitter. The cups are absurdly small. No one quite knows what to do with it. Do you sip quickly? Slurp? Add sugar? Milk? A slice of lemon? A polite cough into your sleeve? It was all still experimental. And yet, something about it stuck. Maybe it was the warmth. Or the ritual. Or the excuse to pause. You imagine the first tea arriving in a manor house, a footman delivers it with all the ceremony of sacred relics. The lady of the house lifts the lid on the tea caddy, carefully locked, of course, and breathes in the scent like it holds the secret to peace itself. And maybe it does. The effect is immediate, even if the taste isn't quite there yet. The room softens. People lean back in their chairs. The fire crackles just a little more kindly. No one's falling asleep yet, but the mood has shifted. The noise of the outside world has dimmed. You try your own first sip. The warmth hits your tongue and seeps downward. Your shoulders relax a little. You imagine this becoming a habit, not because it's exciting, but because it's reassuring. The same cup, the same scent, the same slow settling. Every time. And that's how it begins. The long, slow steep of a nation falling in love not with caffeine, but with calm. So tonight, as you cradle your own imaginary teacup and feel the weight of the day begin to lift, remember, the story of tea in Britain didn't come in with a bang. It arrived with a breath. And it never left. You stay curled in your quiet little parlor, the teacup warming your hands and the fire doing its best to pretend it's more than just decorative. Outside, the rain is beginning to tap politely at the windows, as if even the weather knows not to intrude too loudly on the delicate mood within. But of course, this peaceful tea scene didn't always extend to everyone, not yet. To understand how tea became a national bedtime ritual, you have to follow it not just through parlors and drawing rooms, but through ports and ledgers and entirely too many smugglers. You stand now on the docks of 18th century England. It's early morning, the air heavy with salt, fish, and ambition. Ships groan in the harbor. Men in long coats hurry past, their hands tucked into pockets not because it's cold, but because they're hiding something. Tea. Smuggled tea, to be precise. Historians still argue whether the sheer volume of tea smuggled into Britain during the 1700s ever truly eclipsed the legal supply, but one thing's certain, the government made it complicated. Taxes on tea soared, sometimes up to 119%, which made legal tea a luxury only the well-fed could afford. So what did the rest of Britain do? They turned to smugglers. And these weren't the dashing pirates of bedtime storybooks. These were mildly tired fishermen with secret compartments, shopkeepers with questionable tea chests, and the occasional aristocrat who claimed they had acquired it in Portugal, which was a polite way of saying, I paid someone in a pub and don't ask questions. You walk into one of these shadowy kitchens now. The tea is brewing in a battered kettle that's seen better centuries. The blend is suspicious. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's half real, half leaves from a hedgerow out back. But no one cares. Because the ritual is intact. Water boiled. Leaves steeped. Spoon stirred. Silence settled. Even illegally acquired tea had the same calming effect. The law didn't matter so much when the cup was warm, the chair was soft, and the fire flickered in just the right way. For the working class, tea wasn't just a luxury, it became a small rebellion. A stolen moment of calm in a life otherwise too full of cold dust and unpredictable weather. You imagine the scene, a mother pouring tea for her children, the oldest pretending it's coffee, the youngest cradling their mug like it's magic. No one talks. Not because they're trying to be formal, but because the silence feels earned. Fringe tales from this period describe entire towns that operated underground tea economies. Smugglers would deliver crates to back gardens under moonlight. Housewives would blend black market Darjeeling with dried flowers to stretch the supply. And even then, people would whisper, I sleep better with a cup. You smile at that. Because already, before it became ritual, before it was marketed in tidy pastel boxes labeled sleepy time, tea had begun to slow people down. Not everyone knew the science of it. Not everyone knew the blend. But they knew what it did. You're offered a cup from one of these humble kitchens now. No porcelain here, just a chipped mug, glazed roughly, the glaze worn from years of use. You sip. It's earthy. A little bitter. A little smoky. But the warmth spreads just the same. And suddenly, you understand something important. Tea didn't become Britain's national sleep aid because of flavor. Or health. Or trend. It happened because people needed something to pause with. Something to hold while the world caught its breath. So tonight, if your dreams include contraband tea bags, foggy docks, and the gentle hiss of a kettle boiling over in a back alley, don't be alarmed. You're just steeping in history. You rise from your wooden stool, the warmth of that contraband cup still lingering in your fingers like the echo of a whispered lullaby. Outside, the rain has slowed to a drizzle, soft and half-hearted, more of a murmur than a downpour. You follow a narrow lane between hedgerows and stone walls, through a sleepy village that smells faintly of peat smoke and boiled potatoes. And there, just beyond a moss-covered gate, a parlor window glows. Inside, someone lifts a teacup no bigger than a child's palm, pinky finger daintily aloft, nose tilted with the cautious reverence of someone sipping not a beverage, but a ritual. You've entered the era of tiny teacups and very big manners. The early British tea experience was charmingly awkward. Teacups were imported from China, fragile, handleless, elegant. And Britons, as they do with most things, had opinions. You sit across from a gentleman who's just scalded his fingers on the delicate porcelain. He tries not to yelp. Across the table, a woman adjusts her lace cuff and pretends not to notice. This is tea as performance, and nobody quite knows the rules yet. You reach for your own cup, no handle, too small to feel comfortable, but exquisitely painted. The rim is thin, the liquid inside dangerously close to your knuckles. You sip. Carefully. Historians still debate whether the adoption of tea drinking customs was driven more by genuine enthusiasm or pure peer pressure. But either way, the tiny teacup became a social necessity. In drawing rooms across Britain, tea time became a stage: who could pour gracefully, who had the nicest saucers, who knew exactly how many minutes to steep before things turned bitter. It was a quiet competition, a game of porcelain poker. And with these miniature cups came miniature movements. No slurping. No gulping. Just gentle sips. Controlled pours. Raised eyebrows. You didn't just drink tea. You curated the moment. One fringe fashion of the day involved teacup resters, small velvet pillows used to cushion the cup on your lap. Did they work? Not particularly. Did they look impressive? Absolutely. And that was the point. You watch a young woman stir her tea with a spoon so tiny it might as well be decorative. She places it on the saucer with a clink so precise, it feels like punctuation. A full stop. Nothing more. You notice something as the room settles. There's no rush. The fire crackles gently. Conversation drifts, not booms. Tea, here, has done what few things in history have managed: it has slowed time. And it's not just about relaxation. It's about intention. You can't rush a teacup that tiny. You can't multitask while balancing porcelain with 2 fingers and a crumbling scone. Even the silence that falls between sips is different. It isn't awkward. It's expected. The room breathes with it. You sip again, gingerly, respectfully, and realize this is when the association between tea and calm truly begins. The beverage isn't soothing by nature. It's soothing by context. These cups teach your hands to move gently. These conversations teach your voice to lower. These quiet pauses teach your thoughts to settle. A fringe anecdote from a 1770s diary mentions a man who brewed tea each evening, as a way to remove the day from his shoulders. Not to drink. Not even to serve. Just to hold the cup. Just to sit with it. You watch the steam rise from your cup now, curling like a question you're in no hurry to answer. So tonight, if your dreams lead you into drawing rooms full of tiny cups, soft laughter, and the clink of spoons on porcelain, don't be surprised. You're simply practicing stillness. One sip at a time. You set the porcelain cup down with exaggerated care, as if the table itself might judge you for making even the smallest sound. The tea has cooled. The conversation has meandered into a warm lull. And the fire across the room gives a low pop, like a punctuation mark on an unusually quiet paragraph. You rise and leave the drawing room behind, drifting through heavy curtains and into a dim hallway where the scent of bergamot and baked flour clings to the air like memory. Outside, dusk has folded the sky into soft blue wool. And beyond the hedge-lined lane, you begin to hear something peculiar. A kettle whistle, somewhere in the distance, rising gently, not in alarm, but invitation. You follow it. Because now we're moving into a time when tea was no longer reserved for powdered wigs and pinkies. When it spilled, quite literally, into the streets, kitchens, and lunchboxes of industrial Britain. You're stepping into the age of the working teapot. You enter a factory yard, bricks soot blackened, steam curling from chimneys like impatient ghosts. The whistle grows louder. A bell rings. Doors creak open. And out pours a slow stream of workers, dusted with soot, muscle, and Monday. They head straight for the tea hut. You follow them inside, bare bulbs overhead, the scent of boiling water, and tables scattered with chipped mugs that look like they've seen things. The kettle is enormous. The pot. Heavy. No dainty spouts here, just one solid stream into solid mugs. You take a seat. There's no ceremony. No saucers. No velvet resters. But the tea. It's hot. Strong. Reassuring. You sip, and though it lacks the delicacy of your earlier cup, it holds a different kind of calm. Historians still argue whether tea breaks were formally institutionalized or simply evolved out of necessity. Either way, by the mid-19th century, Britain's labor force had taken the practice and made it sacred. 10 minutes with a mug, a biscuit, and no orders. You watched the workers sit quietly, steam rising from their cups, shoulders finally dropping after hours hunched over machinery. No one talks much. Not because they can't, but because they don't need to. The tea speaks for them. You sip again, and something surprising happens. You begin to feel safe. Not pampered. Not important. But grounded. As if the tea is saying, "You're here." That's enough. One fringe story from a textile mill recounts how a foreman once stopped a loom just to refill the kettle, stating solemnly, "A dry throat leads to sloppy stitches." Whether true or not, it captures the point. Tea became not just comfort, but competence. A tool for survival. And in the quiet that followed those breaks, something magical happened. People didn't fall asleep at their machines. They didn't storm out. They returned with a fraction more patience, a little more breath in their lungs. Tea wasn't a miracle, but it was a pause. You finish your mug and place it beside a row of others, some chipped, some stained, all loved. The room empties slowly. The machines start again. But the stillness lingers like the last drop at the bottom of a cup. You walk back into the fading light. So tonight, if your dreams lead you through factory yards, steam clouds, and mugs warm between tired hands, don't rush to wake. You're just steeping in the part of history that found stillness when it needed it most. You walk a little slower now. Not from exhaustion, but because something about the tea and the quiet and the rhythm of that factory bell has worked its way into your bones. There's no need to hurry when the entire world seems to agree, it's time to pause. You make your way through a cobbled street, passing hedges stitched in fog. A cat yawns from a windowsill. A door creaks open and then gently clicks shut again. Even the buildings seem to whisper. And in one of those brick homes, a kettle is just beginning to purr. You duck through the low doorway and find yourself in a kitchen that could belong to anyone. There's a rug, a kettle, a wood-burning stove, and something sitting on the table that looks like a woolly teapot had a makeover. Ah yes. The tea cozy. You've entered the golden age of cozy culture. The kettle hisses. The teapot is filled, heavy and hopeful. And once the lid goes on, the knitted wool cover follows, like tucking the teapot in for its afternoon nap. Striped. Floral. Slightly lopsided. Definitely handmade. Utterly charming. You sit at the table, elbows on faded linen, and watch as the tea steeps beneath its cozy like a secret being carefully brewed. Historians still argue whether tea cozies were invented out of function or fashion. Some credit Victorian housewives who wanted their tea to stay warm during long conversations. Others say it began as a clever use for leftover wool. Either way, it stuck. And with it came a mindset, one of slowing down, staying in, and sitting just a little longer. You sip your tea, now wrapped in its soft thermal armor, and feel the minutes stretch. Not in boredom. In comfort. You could finish your cup in 5 minutes. But you won't. Because why should you? Around you, a knitting basket hums quietly with soft loops. A biscuit tin yawns open to reveal shortbread. A dog exhales near the hearth with the kind of sigh only animals who've mastered peace can make. One fringe domestic advice book from the 1890s recommends wrapping the teapot as one would swaddle a baby, with patience and care, claiming the retained warmth improves not just flavor, but mood. You believe it. The tea cozy becomes more than an object. It becomes a symbol. A declaration, I am not in a rush. I intend to finish this pot. I intend to sit here until the day lets go of its tension. You glance around the room. There's no ticking clock. Just the soft blur of a hanging wall calendar and the hush of late afternoon settling into early evening. Outside, birds are calling their last notes of the day. Inside, the tea stays warm, because it's been tended to. You pour a second cup. No one judges you for it. This is what the tea cozy taught Britain, that rest isn't accidental. It's something you prepare for. You create the conditions for it. You cover the pot. You pad the chair. You give your cup a saucer, even if it doesn't need one. And then you sit. And breathe. And sip. So tonight, if your dreams take you into rooms filled with wool-wrapped teapots, sagging armchairs, and the slowest conversations in history, don't resist. You've entered the world of intentional quiet. And you're warmly welcome. You rise from the soft cushioned chair and stretch lazily, like a cat who's just decided they might wander into another room, but only if it seems equally cozy. The air outside is cooling, the sun politely excusing itself from the sky. And somewhere, as always, another kettle begins to rumble. But tonight, the brew is different. You walk through a narrow lane that opens onto a garden, herbs dancing lightly in the breeze, chamomile, lemon balm, mint, lavender. It smells like the end of a long day and the beginning of something softer. A woman sits beneath a pergola, plucking petals into a ceramic bowl. She glances up and smiles. No words. Just a nod that says, "You're just in time." This is where Britain's relationship with tea takes a sleepier turn. You've arrived at the birth of the herbal night. It's the 19th century, and while black tea is still the national drink of railways, parlors, and factory breaks, a quiet shift is steeping in the background. Not everyone wants caffeine at all hours. Not everyone wants to lie awake staring at the ceiling rehearsing tomorrow's to-do list. And so, the people begin to brew something gentler. You sit by the hearth as she pours hot water over a small bundle of dried blossoms. The steam rises, carrying the scent of summer evenings and freshly laundered linen. You inhale. It's not just tea, it's a ritual of retreat. Historians still debate when herbal teas began to seriously enter British domestic life, but apothecaries were recommending calming infusions well before the first commercially branded Sleepy Time blend. A teaspoon of valerian here. A sprig of lemon balm there. Chamomile, of course, queen of the calming garden. You cradle the cup in both hands. The brew is pale gold, almost shy. It doesn't need to be bold. It just needs to be there. Across the room, someone snores softly in a chair. No one wakes them. No one even whispers. In this house, sleep is considered sacred, and if tea can help invite it in, even better. A fringe diary entry from 1863 mentions a woman who brewed a nightly cup of lavender tea, to quiet the mind before conversation with dreams. The phrase sticks with you. You take a sip. It's floral. Earthy. Slightly bitter. But it unknots something in your shoulders you didn't know was tense. Outside, the moon begins to rise. The breeze slips through the garden like a lullaby in search of a melody. You pull a knitted throw over your knees and feel the heaviness in your limbs begin to settle in. It's not exhaustion. It's permission. This is the moment where tea became more than comfort. It became transition. A bridge from day to night. From thoughts to rest. From noise to quiet. You glance at the herbs drying by the fire. Each one has a job, soothing the gut, calming the nerves, warming the hands. They don't fix anything. They don't promise sleep. But they make space for it. So tonight, if your dreams take you through a garden at dusk, where someone hands you a cup that smells like peace and tastes like nothing urgent, don't hurry. You're right where you need to be. Let it steep. You stay wrapped in a throw a moment longer, the cup now empty in your hands, its warmth lingering like a memory at the edges of your fingers. Outside, the moon has fully arrived, settled like a polite guest above the garden wall. The breeze carries the scent of lemon balm and quiet intentions. But your feet are restless again, not with urgency, just curiosity. You rise and step beyond the gate, walking a little further into a time when Britain's love of tea wasn't confined to gardens or parlors. It reached across continents. Across oceans. Across empires. You've entered the complicated, sprawling, and deeply contradictory tea house of Imperial Britain, the century when tea became not just a national ritual, but a global commodity. You walk through the port of London now, a little busier than you might like at this hour. The ships are docked in neat rows, their hulls loaded with crates marked not fragile, but essential. Inside, chests of tea. Hundreds of them. Some from India. Some from Ceylon. Some from places you'll never see. Historians still argue whether the British love of tea fueled the empire or simply mirrored it, but one thing is clear, the ritual you now find so soothing was built on a complicated web of colonial effort. You step into a tea warehouse, not loud, but not silent either. Workers move carefully, stacking crates, measuring leaves, repackaging bundles for domestic sale. The scent is sharp, tannin-rich, earthy, powerful. This is not your gentle chamomile. This is industrial tea, strong, black, meant to travel. But here's the strange part, even in this place of movement and labor, there is calm. Everyone seems to know their role. The tea is treated not like cargo, but like treasure. There's no shouting. Just the soft scrape of crates and the occasional rustle of paper. You sip a sample from a merchant's blend, malty. Deep. A little too assertive for bedtime, but you feel the undertones of what it would become when softened with milk and sugar, brewed in a ceramic pot, and served beside a window where nothing needs doing. This is the contradiction. Back home, tea was a quiet companion. A sign of rest. A lullaby in liquid form. Out here. It was power. Movement. Trade. One fringe story tells of a merchant who carried a teapot aboard every voyage, not to drink from, but to remind him of why he was out at sea. He would polish it each night, then pack it away like a compass. You walk a little further, now inland, past country estates where conservatories were built not for sunlight but for tea service. The teacups there are lighter. The gardens are prettier. The conversations softer. No one here thinks much about where the tea came from. Just how it should be poured. You take a seat in one such conservatory. The tea here is Darjeeling, light, floral, served in delicate porcelain. But something about it feels different now. Not wrong. Just complicated. And yet, you sip. Because that's the heart of this section of the story. Tea is comfort. But it was never neutral. You can't untangle its roots from empire. But you can hold the cup with awareness. And maybe, just maybe, that makes the ritual deeper, not less peaceful. So tonight, if your dreams carry you across oceans in a cargo hold full of tea chests, or drop you into a quiet British garden where the only sound is a spoon gently tapping porcelain, don't resist the tension. Just sip thoughtfully. Because comfort, too, can ask questions. You leave the conservatory behind, its delicate china and complicated echoes settling gently behind you like a curtain drawn at the end of a slow scene. The gravel path crunches softly underfoot as you wander back into the familiar folds of domestic Britain, houses not grand, but snug. Lamps glowing behind curtains. Teapots warming on stoves. A quiet buzz beginning to rise, not of conversation, but of marketing. You've entered the golden age of tea advertisements, when comfort was no longer whispered into parlors but broadcast in soft tones from posters, papers, and eventually, the radio. You step into a corner shop. The bell above the door gives the most apologetic jingle in retail history. The walls are lined with tins, painted in pastels, gold leaf, and illustrations of smiling housewives in immaculately calm kitchens. The shelves hum with slogans, "A cup of calm, refreshes you gently, there's always time for tea." You smile. Because this isn't advertising in the modern sense, it's not aggressive or loud. It's almost shy. Like the brand knows it doesn't need to shout. The teacup speaks for itself. Historians still debate whether tea companies intentionally targeted sleepiness as part of their campaigns, or if it was just a convenient byproduct of marketing relaxation. But by the 20th century, the connection was unmistakable. Tea wasn't just a drink. It was a domestic mood. You walk into a sitting room now, where a radio crackles gently with a familiar tune. A family sits in near-perfect stillness, mother pouring tea, father folding the paper, child nibbling a biscuit shaped like a dog that refuses to bark. The ad plays between programs, put the kettle on. The day can wait. No rush. No hurry. No caffeine disclaimers. Just steam and rhythm. You sit with them, a guest in their quiet ritual. Your cup is thick ceramic, glazed in a soft blue. It fits your hands like it was made for the end of the day. You take a sip. The tea isn't herbal, but it's familiar. Warm. Reassuring. One fringe ad campaign from the 1930s encouraged consumers to brew a pot before bed, after supper, and during dreams. Whether or not the tea actually reached REM sleep is up for debate, but it cemented the idea: tea means rest. You glance at the sideboard. A stack of postcards from the seaside. A tin of shortbread. A folded knitting pattern. The soundtrack of a quiet life, played in major chords and minor movement. The tea box nearby promises comfort in every cup. And you believe it, not because it's true in every case, but because enough people wanted it to be true that it might as well be. You open the paper. Inside, a full-page advert shows a couple on matching recliners, sipping tea beneath the words, "No evening is complete without it." You feel the truth in that. So much of tea's association with sleep doesn't come from its chemistry, it comes from its choreography. The kettle, the pour, the gentle clink of spoon against cup. The blanket. The chair. The exhale. It's not the tea that sends you to sleep. It's the life you build around it. So tonight, if your dreams feature sepia-toned kitchens, enamel kettles, and jingles that promise quiet in 3 sips or less, just lean back. The advertisement is still playing, just a little softer now. You step away from the cozy little shop, the doors jingle fading behind you like the last note of a lullaby. Outside, the world has gone dark and still, save for the faint rattle of teacups being washed in kitchen sinks and the low hum of nighttime kettles preparing their final task. The air smells of wet pavement and peppermint steam. And now, you're headed toward the next turning point in Britain's long and sleepy relationship with tea. A humble invention. A small rectangle. A shortcut to calm. The tea bag. You push open the back door of a 1950s kitchen. It swings just wide enough to let in a gust of cold air and the scent of boiled carrots. Inside, someone is already at the stove, tilting a chipped kettle with practiced ease. On the counter sits a tin, not filled with loose leaf, but with neat little paper packets, folded and ready. No fuss. No strainers. No ceremony. Just dip. Steep. Sip. You sit at the table and hold one in your hand. It's light, slightly rough. The string flutters, the paper tag a whisper of branding. The revolution, it turns out, isn't loud. It's practical. Historians still debate whether the invention of the tea bag was a marvel of convenience or a betrayal of true tea flavor. But one thing's for certain, it made the ritual easier. You watch as your host, an older man in slippers, socks falling halfway down his calves, brews a cup with barely a thought. No scale. No thermometer. Just a rhythm so casual it might be mistaken for instinct. The bag bobs up and down in the mug. 1, 2, 3 times. Spoons in some sugar. A splash of milk. And then, stillness. You take a sip. It's not perfect. But it is predictable, and that's half the battle. By the mid-20th century, the tea bag was everywhere, in offices, on trains, at petrol stations. It was in your grandmother's purse. It was in hospital waiting rooms and tiny B&Bs with names like Seaview Cottage, despite being nowhere near the sea. And with that ease came evening tea, not the formal afternoon affair, not the break room revival, but the last cup. The soft exhale before bed. No need to measure. No need to wash a pot. Just fill the kettle. Drop the bag. Wait a moment. One fringe health pamphlet from the 1960s even suggested that the mere act of watching a tea bag steep induces a meditative state comparable to light trance. You nod, watching your own tea slowly bloom in the cup like a lazy sunrise. You rest your elbows on the formica tabletop. The wallpaper is faded, the ceiling yellowed from a time when nobody thought twice about smoking after supper. But the tea? The tea is timeless. You finish the cup. And, almost automatically, another bag is dropped into the mug. No questions. No request. It's just what's done. Because by now, tea has fully claimed the evening. It's a badge of winding down. A physical gesture that tells your body the day is over and the night is yours. Even if it's not herbal. Even if it's technically full of caffeine. No one really minds. Because the point isn't science, it's signal. So tonight, if your dreams show you a mug with a paper tag, a kettle that hums instead of whistles, and the gentle bob of a tea bag on a string, let yourself follow it. You're already halfway to sleep. You set your mug down with that barely there clink that means, yes, that was enough. The string from the tea bag drapes lazily over the side, like a thread left hanging from a well-worn sweater. Somewhere outside, a fox tiptoes across a garden path, unnoticed by everyone except you and maybe the moon. You lean back, eyes half-lidded, and think, not about the tea, but about what it's done. Because somewhere along the way, this drink, this simple, stewed handful of leaves, has done something quietly extraordinary. It's made slowing down feel like an achievement. And that brings us to something wonderfully woolly. The tea cozy may have been about function, but what it created was a culture. Not one of extravagance or etiquette, but of comfort. Of slowness. Of cozy corners and soft blankets and dozing off mid-sentence with a lukewarm cup resting on your chest. You shuffle across a rug into a living room that could exist in almost any decade, floral cushions, stacks of old books, the quiet tick of a mantel clock. A teapot rests on a knit tea cozy shaped like a cottage. There's a cat asleep on an armchair, radiating apathy and warmth in equal measure. You sit on the edge of the sofa and reach for the pot. Still warm. Still perfect. You pour. This isn't about taste anymore. It's about temperature. And ritual. Historians still debate whether British, cozy culture, was born from necessity, drafty houses, damp weather, long winters, or if it was a carefully cultivated response to a world that moved just a bit too fast. But either way, it stuck. You glance around the room. The radio plays softly, a gardening show with no real urgency. A puzzle waits unfinished on a side table. And on every available surface, mugs. Some full. Some empty. None rushed. This is the cultural inheritance of tea time. It's not an event. It's an atmosphere. You pick up a mug that still holds the ghost of mint. It's cold now, but you sip anyway. Because the point was never the flavor. It was the act. The pause. The pocket of peace in the middle of nothing particularly urgent. A fringe decorating magazine from the 1980s featured a feature titled Designing for Dozing, where tea, blankets, and low lighting were listed as furniture. You approve. The truth is, by now, tea doesn't even have to be good. It just has to be there. You could put hot water in a cup and call it a promise. You hear the kettle click off in the kitchen again. Someone else is up. Or maybe they never went to bed. Doesn't matter. They're not brewing caffeine. They're brewing comfort. You look to the window. A single street lamp glows. Nothing moves. You're warm. Not just in your body. In your mind. So tonight, if your dreams are set in softly lit living rooms, with mismatched mugs and sleepy pets, and whether you never quite need to go out in, don't rush to wake. You're simply curled up inside a moment. One that's steeped slowly. You don't get up just yet. The room is warm, and the blanket has managed to climb its way halfway up your shoulder, which is about as much effort as anyone expects of you tonight. The last cup of tea you sipped is now empty, the mug resting on your knee like a sleepy companion. But there's something else brewing just behind your thoughts now, herbs. Not new ones, not trendy ones, but gentle, ancient things. You ease yourself into the kitchen, where someone has just set a small tin on the counter. It doesn't clatter. It lands. The label reads, Chamomile and Friends, hand-scrawled in fading ink. Inside, a dried garden. Flowers and leaves and mystery. You drop a small scoop into a strainer. The kettle hums like a lullaby. And just like that, you've stepped into the true rise of Britain's sleepy blends. It's the 19th century again, but this time in drawing rooms, kitchens, and side cabinets tucked beside bed frames. People are discovering that tea doesn't always need to wake you. It can also help you drift. You settle into a chair by a window that rattles softly in the breeze. Outside, not much is happening. The sky is thinking about rain. The birds have called it a night. You hold the mug in both hands and breathe in the steam. Chamomile. Maybe a touch of lavender. Maybe something else you can't name, but recognize anyway. Historians still argue whether these herbal blends were passed down as folklore or crafted by apothecaries with a flair for bedtime. Likely both. Some were sold in little brown paper packets. Others were grown in backyard plots and shared between neighbors with tired eyes and busy minds. You take a sip. The flavor is faintly floral, like walking past a garden with your mouth slightly open. It doesn't punch. It settles. One fringe recipe, scribbled into the margin of an 1851 herbal manual, suggests adding crushed fennel to a nighttime brew, to help dreams become kinder. You don't know if it works. But it tastes like someone hoped it would. You think about the shift that happened here. Tea stopped being a social event. It became personal. A habit. A whisper. A reason to stand still for 5 minutes before crawling into bed and forgetting the day. In bedrooms across Britain, small mugs appeared on nightstands. Saucerless. Unfussy. Sometimes with a teaspoon balanced precariously inside. They weren't for hosting. They were for holding. You take another sip. The tea isn't strong. But it doesn't need to be. It's not there to fix anything. It's just there to say, it's okay. You're done now. The dog snores under the table. A book lies open at your elbow, forgotten mid-sentence. You exhale without realizing you were holding your breath. Because now, tea is not just a drink. It's a permission slip to rest. So tonight, if your dreams carry you to quiet kitchens, candlelit hallways, or beds where mugs leave faint rings on coasters, don't resist. Just let the herbs do their work. They've been waiting centuries for you. You let the mug rest on the table beside you, the last curl of steam twisting upward and disappearing as if it knows the day is done. There's nothing left to say. Which is fitting, really, because now you're about to enter a chapter of the tea story where words get a little complicated. You pull a blanket over your knees and open a small book from the armrest. The cover says nothing. Just a gold-embossed teacup and a title too faded to read. Inside, pages unfold not in narrative, but in empire. Because while tea has long whispered comfort, there's a louder truth under the saucer. Britain's national calm was brewed in a colonial teapot. You turn the page and find yourself walking along a hillside in Assam. The air here smells different, heavier, greener, hotter. Fields stretch in every direction, planted not with wild herbs or sleepy chamomile, but Camellia sinensis, the plant that would change everything. Workers move between the rows. Some are barefoot. Most are quiet, not from serenity, but fatigue. The baskets they carry are heavy. The sun has no interest in cloud cover today. This is the other side of your bedtime tea. Historians still argue how to frame this moment. Is it industry or exploitation? A symbol of global trade or a legacy of imbalance? Likely all of the above. Because here, in the colonies, tea wasn't about stillness. It was about supply. You sit for a moment on a low wall, the edge warm from the day. A tea overseer walks by, shouting instructions in a language that tries hard to sound polite. A girl no older than 13 bends to pick more leaves. You look down at your hands. Still warm from the herbal brew. Still wrapped in comfort. And yet. You flip the page in your invisible book, and now you're in Ceylon. Then Kenya. Then the Caribbean. The plantations changed, but the routine did not. The leaves were gathered. The crates were filled. The ships were loaded. And the people sipping their third cup before bed never paused to ask where it all came from. That's the thing about rituals. They get comfortable. And comfort doesn't always come with context. But now you know. And strangely, it doesn't make your tea feel less soothing. If anything, it makes it more real. The warmth, the quiet, it's all still there. It just sits atop a longer history. One not always told over the clink of porcelain. A fringe story from the 1930s claims a British importer once told a friend, "I don't need to see where it grows, I only need to know how it pours." You close the imaginary book with a quiet snap. Because now, you do see. You rise from the chair and head back to the kitchen, setting the mug in the sink. The water runs. The day ends. And the tea, for all its history, did what it promised. It helped you pause. So tonight, if your dreams drift between soft pillows and distant plantations, between quiet kitchens and complicated pages, don't resist. You're not here to solve it. You're just here to steep in awareness. You leave the kitchen with clean hands and a heavier kind of quiet. The kind that doesn't interrupt sleep, but settles just under it, like an extra blanket folded gently across the end of the bed. Tea has stopped talking now. But it hasn't stopped speaking. You cross the hall into a small lounge where the television is off, but the memories still play. The wallpaper is patterned with teacups. There's a coaster collection on the bookshelf. And in the center of the coffee table sits a tin that once held English breakfast but now contains, predictably, buttons. This is the era of advertising comfort, where tea was sold not as a product, but as a feeling. You lower yourself onto the settee. The cushions are firmer than they should be. Somewhere in this room, an unseen narrator is just beginning to speak. Put the kettle on. Take a break. Everything else can wait. You smile. You've heard this voice before. Not in person, but somewhere between commercial jingles and old radio shows that seem to exist only at frequencies slightly below waking thought. You've arrived at the mid-20th century, where tea became a character in the national bedtime story. You watch as a black and white ad plays in your mind. A housewife in a spotless apron places a teapot on a table beside her husband's slippered feet. They both smile, not because the tea is especially good, but because it's there. The signal of day's end. Of safety. Historians still discuss how brands like Tetley, Typhoo, and PG Tips shaped Britain's domestic habits. But the truth is, by the 1950s, tea had transcended brand. It was habit made visible. You reach for an old biscuit tin and find inside a stack of clippings. Vintage print ads promising peace in every cup, quiet between the clatter, and the particularly daring, sleep better, wake kinder. One fringe campaign tried to launch a bedtime blend with a cartoon owl on the box. It flopped. Not because people didn't want bedtime tea, but because they already had it. They just didn't call it that. You pour from a mock pot now, imaginary steam curling in vintage animation style. The family around you wears matching cardigans. The dog has its own cushion. Everyone holds a mug. No one is speaking. No one needs to. The tea has spoken. Even now, in modern ads, the same visual cues linger: soft lighting, gentle music, hands curled around mugs like they're holding secrets. It's not about flavor. It's about frictionlessness. Tea asks nothing of you. It simply is. You lean back on the settee. A voiceover hums through the air. It's not just a cup of tea. It's the reason the house goes quiet. You nod, eyes half closed. Because that's the brilliance of it. Tea didn't need to market itself as a sleep aid. It just needed to show you someone slowing down. So tonight, if your dreams come packaged like a cozy commercial, complete with ceramic mugs, house shoes, and that quiet moment just before the credits roll, don't skip it. That's not just nostalgia. That's tea, tucking you in. You stretch gently, the kind of stretch that requires no follow-through, just a sigh and the satisfaction of motion. The room around you stays dim and warm. The vintage voices from imaginary ads fade into the background, replaced by the soft click of a modern switch. You're in a kitchen again. But this time, it's recent. Tidy. Quiet. The light above the stove glows like a low moon, and they're on the counter. A box of tea bags. You reach for it. It doesn't rustle. It whispers. The cardboard is light, the printing soft. The tab at the top folds open with that gently satisfying flap-flap sound. Inside, rows of individually wrapped tiny conveniences, each promising the same thing: easy calm. Welcome to the modern era of tea bags, where bedtime brews require nothing more than boiled water and the barest effort imaginable. You drop one into a mug. The string flutters. The paper tag flops against the ceramic. And just like that, you've started your wind-down routine with a ritual so simple it feels instinctual. Historians still debate whether the teabag revolution diluted the quality of tea or democratized it, but one thing is certain: the teabag made rest more accessible. No strainers. No loose leaves. No teapots, if you didn't want them. You could make your sleepy tea in a chipped mug during a Zoom call and still feel like you were participating in something ancient. You lean against the counter and watch the water darken. The bag sways like a sea creature, trailing warmth into the cup. You don't even need to think about the timing. You've done this 1,000 times. You know when it's ready by instinct, like brushing your teeth or turning off the last light before bed. You sip. The tea is mild. Perhaps lemon and honey. Maybe rooibos. Maybe something floral with a name you can't pronounce. It doesn't matter. The goal isn't taste. It's motionlessness. You carry your mug to the sofa. No saucer. No ceremony. Just hands wrapped around the ceramic like it's keeping your thoughts warm. One fringe article in a 1990s lifestyle magazine called Bedtime Tea, the adult version of a lullaby, not because it knocked you out, but because it gave your body something to hold while your mind let go. You sip. You breathe. The bag floats at the bottom of your cup, like a soft anchor holding you in place. You glance around. The room is full of modern comfort: central heating, wireless lamps, the gentle hum of a distant dishwasher, but the tea remains the simplest part. A thread tying centuries of slow evenings together with barely any effort. You glance at your phone. Notifications blink, unread. You flip it over. Because this moment doesn't need a soundtrack. So tonight, if your dreams arrive wrapped in paper envelopes, labeled in sleepy fonts, and steeped in 2-minute routines, let them. You're not rushing anymore. You're ready. You set the mug down on your bedside table, the tag from the tea bag still resting over the edge like a tiny flag that says, "Mission accomplished." The light is low. The house is quiet. The walls don't speak, but they don't need to. The stillness says enough. You climb into bed with a kind of intentional softness. The covers fold around you like the lid on a familiar tin. Your body knows the script now. It's been written not in ink, but in steam. This is the final act. The last cup. The long exhale. Because over centuries, tea has evolved from a foreign leaf to a domestic lullaby. And somehow, with no official title, no prescription, no claim beyond comfort, it became a national sleep aid. You lie back and think of all the moments you've walked through tonight, scrolls of time steeped in calm. From queens delicately sipping from thimble-sized porcelain, to factory workers letting their shoulders drop, to garden benches filled with herbs that carry dreams in their oils. You've brewed your way through rebellion, ritual, empire, and marketing, all to arrive here. Quiet. Still. Warm. And you understand something now. It's not just the tea. It's the shape of the evening it creates. The clink of the spoon. The wait for the boil. The moment you wrap both hands around the mug and let the day fall off your shoulders like an old coat. Tea doesn't command rest. It invites it. Even now, across Britain, tea bags are sinking slowly into mugs while kettles hum their final song. Nightshirts are pulled over sleepy shoulders. Cats curl tighter. Lights dim. The house doesn't sleep because the clock says to. It sleeps because the tea says it's time. One fringe anecdote tells of an insomniac who brewed a bedtime cup every night, not to fall asleep, but to have a reason to stop trying. Eventually, that was enough. You turn your head toward the window. The stars are quiet. Your breath slows. And somewhere nearby, the last kettle clicks off. So tonight, if your dreams begin with the sound of boiling water and end with a barely sipped cup resting beside your pillow, let them. You've followed the steam. And now, you're where you were always going. Let your thoughts settle now. Let the light soften. Let your breath fall into its slow, steady rhythm, the one that feels like a whisper tucked beneath your ribs. You've wandered through time tonight. Through parlors and factories, kitchens and conservatories. You've walked the winding paths of tradition, carrying a cup in your hands that somehow always felt familiar. Now, let the warmth drift from your fingertips. Let the memory of steam dissolve into quiet. There's nothing left to steep. Nothing left to stir. Just this moment, this breath, this hush. Let your muscles ease, one by one, shoulders, jaw, fingertips, toes. Let the bed hold you. Let your mind fold gently into the soft crease between stories and sleep. You're done for the day. The cup is empty. The tea bag is wrung. And you are perfectly still. No alarm. No finale. Just rest, settling in like the last drop from the pot. Sleep now, slowly. Steep yourself in silence. And let the night pour gently over you.